This week on Jerusalem Dateline, Israel makes history and opens an embassy in Bahrain, one of the next steps in the Abraham Accords. Plus, U.S. military leaders face angry senators about the U.S. pullout from Afghanistan. And CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network, celebrates 60 years of broadcasting to the world and standing with Israel and the Jewish people. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Despite growing chaos in the Middle East, the Abraham Accords are moving forward. The most recent step strengthens historic ties between Israel and Bahrain. Foreign Minister Yair Lapid made the first official visit to Bahrain by an Israeli minister since last year's historic signing at the White House.
This is an historic moment, and a reminder that history is made by people who know history, people who love and respect history, but also ready to change and make history.
Lapid spoke in the capital city of Manama to inaugurate the new Israeli embassy and sign agreements with his Bahraini counterpart, Abdulatif Al-Zayani.
The official opening of embassies, which will symbolize diplomatic cooperation between us, more cooperation in the fields of tourism and technology, culture, energy, and environmental protection.
Lapid said the two countries share opportunities as well as threats.
Together with our friends in the Gulf, we are leading a brave coalition of moderates. A coalition that is looking forward and creating a prosperous future of stability and tolerance.
Lapid and Zayani toured the USS Pearl Harbor landing ship and met with the U.S. Vice Admiral over naval forces in the region. Following his meeting with Zayani, Lapid tweeted that Bahrain would open its embassy in Israel by the end of the year. Earlier, he met with King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa to thank him for the leadership and inspiration that led to this day. He also met with Crown Prince and Prime Minister Sheikh Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa.
This is a historic day. This is not a cliche. The Middle East is changing and we are learning it every day. We learned that last year with the signing of the Abraham Accords, and we also learned it just a few weeks ago in Kabul.
I don't see the embassy's importance just as a diplomatic mission. No, I see that Foreign Minister, His Excellency Yair Lapid's visit to Bahrain, opening the embassy, is also the start of the warm relations among people of both countries.
Prominent Bahraini journalist and author Adia Ahmed Al-Sayed says even though both countries face Iran as a common threat, that's not what brings them together.
What brought us together is that we are a community. This is a Middle East. Embracing each other, coming together, having relations also enables you to fight a common enemy. We don't need wars in the region. We need to fight ideologies.
After Lapid's landing in Manama, a Gulf Air flight departed for Tel Aviv, initiating direct flights between the countries. Greeted with a water salute, the pilot was As-Sayed's husband.
He's quite excited. He kept on telling me that I used to always go around Israel, but today I will land there. I think the feelings I have is not because he's my family and my partner, my husband, but it's the feeling of any Bahraini who wanted to be on that flight today, because this is how warm relations start.
From Bahrain to New York City, for the first time in more than a decade, an Israeli prime minister not named Netanyahu delivered Israel's address to the annual UN General Assembly. In his first speech on the world stage, Prime Minister Naftali Bennett struck similar themes as his predecessor did. Like Benjamin Netanyahu before him, Naftali Bennett called on the world to pay attention to Iran and its threat to the Jewish state.
Israel is quite literally surrounded by Hezbollah, Shia militias, Islamic Jihad, and Hamas. What do they all have in common? They all want to destroy my country, and they're all backed by Iran. Iran seeks to dominate the region and seeks to do so under a nuclear umbrella.
Bennett's main priority? Stopping Iran's nuclear program, and he wants international help to do it. He laid out his case, pointing to how Iran is defying the UN's own nuclear monitoring agency and crossing red lines, such as how it's enriched uranium at nearly weapons-grade level.
We cannot tire. We will not tire. Israel will not allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon.
Bennett, who met with leaders of the UAE and Bahrain for the first time, thanks to the Abraham Accords, described the new regional relationship as a bright light. Yet he called out countries that joined a recent UN conference condemning Israel.
Fighting the only democracy in the Middle East doesn't make you woke. Adopting cliches about Israel without even bothering to learn the basic facts, well, that's just plain lazy.
Bennett began his speech by referencing the prophetic restoration of the Jewish people.
We are an ancient nation, returned to our ancient homeland, revived our ancient language, restored our ancient sovereignty. Israel is a miracle of Jewish revival. Am Yisrael Chai, the nation of Israel, is alive, and the state of Israel is its beating heart.
Top U.S. military generals face tough questioning by lawmakers on Capitol Hill, saying they believed U.S. forces should have remained in Afghanistan, and implying they communicated that advice to the president.
The nation's leading generals faced tough questioning by lawmakers on Capitol Hill Tuesday, saying they believed U.S. forces should remain in Afghanistan, and implying they communicated that advice to the president. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff testifying that he believed it necessary to maintain U.S. troop presence ahead of the withdrawal, offering a differing account from President Biden's statements.
My assessment was back in the fall of 20, and it remained consistent throughout, that we should keep a steady state of 2,500, and it could bounce up to 3,500, maybe something like that, in order to move toward a negotiated, gated solution.
Did you ever present that assessment personally to President Biden?
I don't discuss exactly what my conversations are with the sitting president in the Oval Office, but I can tell you what my personal opinion was, and I'm always candid.
General Frank McKenzie saying he had warned what would happen if we didn't leave 2,500 troops behind.
And my view is that 2,500 was an appropriate number to remain, and that if we went below that number, in fact, we would probably witness a collapse of the Afghan government and the Afghan military. So,
General McKenzie, I guess my question is, would it be fair for the committee to assume that both President Trump and President Biden received that specific information?
I believe it would be reasonable for the committee to assume that.
That contradicts President Biden's statements in an interview with ABC News last month.
Your military advisors did not tell you, no, we should just keep 2,500 troops. It's been a stable situation for the last several years. We can do that. We can continue to do that.
No, no one said that to me that I can recall.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki pushed back against suggestions that the president misled the public on recommendations from his military advisors.
The president made clear that the advice was split. He didn't outline what every individual conveyed to him in private advice.
Michael O'Hanlon of the Brookings Institution weighed in on the issue on CBN's Faith Nation.
The central reality is we didn't have to lose Afghanistan in the first place. We didn't have to decide to leave in April. And Mr. Biden's team did not recommend that we depart when he made that decision back in the spring.
Coming up, shining a spotlight on persecution around the world on people of faith. For too many people of faith around the world, persecution follows them to the grave. We're shining a spotlight on the abuse, and despite international and domestic laws that protect the ability of Christians and people of all faiths to bury their dead according to their beliefs, sometimes whole cemeteries are exhumed or razed, oftentimes as an affront to already persecuted communities. Jennifer Wishon has more on this abuse.
In countries around the world where Christians and many other religious minorities face persecution, often their abuse doesn't even end when they die. The destruction of cemeteries in many countries only adds to the trauma of families. And for more on these atrocities being committed, I'm joined by USCIRF Vice Chairman Nuri Turkel. Thank you so much for being with us. You know, I think for anyone who studied World War II, we know about the Nazis using Jewish headstones for construction projects. And we know the grief that certainly caused these communities that were already facing so much. But this is a problem that is happening today. I know from your fact sheet. Just last year in Egypt, there was a Coptic Christian, a young boy who died, whose body was exhumed because some of the Muslim folks in the area didn't want a Christian buried in their predominantly Muslim cemetery. This is happening today. Tell us about this problem.
The cemeteries is a last connection that the group of religious minorities have to connect with the passing relatives or loved ones. Even that kind of basic freedom is not even guaranteed in certain societies, despite the fact that there is a clear international law that provides protection to have these kind of religious sites. Even in this country, in the United States, a Jewish community in particular is still experiencing this kind of vandalization and purposeful destruction of cemeteries and religiously significant sites.
Right, Jewish people around the world as well. And you and I have talked a lot about the genocide currently taking place against the Uyghur people in China. Give us a sense of what they're facing in terms of their burial grounds today. At least 100
Uyghur cemeteries have been destroyed since 2018. And this includes the cemetery, sadly, where my maternal grandparents buried. Destroyed cemeteries, some of them have been used for commercial purposes, such as paid parking lots, public parks. For families like yours who've been affected by this, what is the trauma like to know that your loved ones are paved over, that their burial grounds in some cases are just, they're gone forever? Yeah, it's hard to describe how traumatic and sad the circumstances that these people, including my own, have gone through. While you're alive, you're persecuted because of your religious belief, because of your race, ethnicity, way of life. And then once you die, they don't even leave you alone. So this is how it's so difficult to explain the tragic nature of the tormented psychological circumstances that these irresponsible governments have put religious minorities through. Vice Chairman Turkel, thank you so much. Thank you again for having me on.
Up next, an $18 million gift to Christian missionary doctors serving Africa's most needy. $18 million. That's how much the couple in our next story is giving to the heroic work of Christian missionary doctors serving in Africa. Mark Gershon and his wife, Rabbi Erica Gershon, believe deeply that they are fulfilling the Jewish command to love the stranger by helping those who serve Africa's most needy. George Thomas has more on the efforts of this incredible couple.
Spend time with Mark and Erica Gershon, and you'll quickly discover their passion for helping those less fortunate is rooted in love.
Love is always an action word. When we commit to loving somebody or something, it means that we have to do something to manifest that love.
Mark is a New York-based entrepreneur and philanthropist. His wife, Erica, is a Jewish rabbi. The Gershons say the deep love for their faith compels them to give away millions of dollars of their personal wealth each year to fulfill their Jewish obligation to love the stranger.
The Bible never tells us to love our children because it's something we will do without the Bible's help. We'll love our children even if nobody instructs us to do so. Yet the Bible tells us to love the stranger over and over again, 36 times, because loving the stranger is not something that comes naturally. It's not something that comes easily.
The Gershons are putting the practice of loving the stranger by supporting the work of African Christians and missionary doctors across the African continent.
When we learned some 20 years ago about the work of Christian missionary doctors in Africa and how they're sacrificing everything in order to serve the poor by bringing health care to those who otherwise wouldn't have it, we said, this is what it means to love the stranger.
This week, the couple pledged a record $18 million, along with matching funds from the United Bank of Switzerland and others, to support the work of African Mission Healthcare. which he co-founded 11 years ago.
This gift of at least $20 million, and hopefully the matching grant will make it much more than that, is going to transform African healthcare. It's going to enable us to build the systems, the infrastructure, the hospitals that will treat literally millions of patients now and into the future.
CBN and the Gersons have partnered on several projects on the continent to provide quality, compassionate care to patients. African Mission Healthcare says this latest gift from Rabbi Erica and Mark Gerson is the largest private gift ever to Christian medical missions. They firmly believe the Bible verse in Malachi 3:10 that when you help the stranger, God will pour out his blessings.
God says, test me. I believe it's the only test that God uses in the Bible. It's just, test me, give to charity, he says, and you will enjoy blessings yourself. And it is so true. No one has ever made a donation to serve the African poor by supporting Christian missionary physicians and regretted it. It has been the blessing of our life. It has been the blessing of Erica and my life to be able to partner with these sacred people, these doctors who are working in Africa in the name of their Christian faith to serve the poor. And it's something that we always want to do more of.
George Thomas, CBN News.
Coming up, the CBN story, celebrating 60 years of broadcasting to the world and standing with the State of Israel and the Jewish people. On October 1st, 1961, CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network, went on the air in a small TV station. Now, 60 years later, CBN is broadcasting around the world. Throughout these 6 decades, one of the pillars of CBN has been its commitment to the State of Israel and the Jewish people. It began with a commitment and a vow from CBN's founder, Pat Robertson.
While Superbook took the gospel to Japan, CBN prepared to go on the air in the Middle East. For decades, Pat had always felt a connection to one nation in particular. On June 5th, 1967, the Six-Day War began, and Israel would reunite Jerusalem under Jewish rule for the first time in 2,000 years. On the same day, CBN broke ground on the renovations for the old studio at WYAH.
Israel is the chosen people. They are the chosen nation. And so in 1967, for CBN to break ground at the same time the Six-Day War was for that enormous significance that the two are now tied together.
That bond was strengthened when Pat traveled to Israel in 1974 to interview Prime Minister Itzhak Rabin.
What would you ask of the United States? I believe if one wants to see any future to the free world in the right sense, to the democratic way of life, I believe without strong America, the future might be not as hopeful as it can be with strong America.
He knew that if America was strong, Israel would be taken care of. Well, I went back to our group that was with me up on the Mount of Olives where we were staying, and that night I made a vow that I personally, in any ministry that I was associated with, regardless of the cost, that we were going to stand with Israel.
For this area, let's do that for the whole, just lay our hands on it.
Pat began praying for a way to broadcast into Israel.
Wonderful people.
Years later, he was offered a TV station in southern Lebanon.
And here was one on the border of Israel, and it was being given to me. But I knew that I shouldn't put my hand on something in that volatile region without it being cleared for sure by the Lord.
Pat prayed for a sign for confirmation, specifically that he would receive something of gold as evidence that he should take the station. Days went by, but no gold, until he checked his private mailbox.
Inside, there was a letter, and there was several pictures of gold coins, 24-karat gold, struck in a mold by Pablo Picasso. And he said, I want to make these available to CBN. That was the evidence. So I said, all right, we've heard from the Lord. So we got the station
Pat Robertson, in the name of Messiah Jesus, I'm pleased to hand you the keys to Jesus Star of Hope television station right here in the Holy Land.
Spring of 1982, Middle East Television, a CBN-owned and operated Channel 12 TV station, was put on the air.
With access to 12 nations in the region, METV used popular programming like NFL football, soccer, and the hit TV show Touched by an Angel to attract viewers. People then stayed tuned for the 700 Club.
METV was the pioneer. Nobody was doing that, and it had awesome impact among the Arab-speaking population to the north towards Lebanon and to the east of Syria and Jordan, and across Israel.
For us here in the Jerusalem Bureau, it's been a privilege to serve with Pat Robertson and stand with Israel and the Jewish people. If you'd like to see the entire CBN story, you can log on to cbn.com. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can also access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And don't forget to sign up for our email blasts so you can continue to receive all of our exciting CBN content. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.